Hi class, this is Mr. Tan and we are looking at business law and question 4, P4. And P4 says, what are possible legal solutions to a range of different business problems as described in the case scenarios. So possible legal solutions to business problems. So we have to look at the case scenario. And the case scenario deals with Fabian and Big House Limited. Now Fabian is a builder and Big House Limited is a company and they have a restaurant and they want to transform the restaurant into a 3-bedroom house and sell it on the open market. So they have instructed Fabian to transform the restaurant into a 3-bedroom house, which he has agreed. But what Fabian has done is Fabian has agreed to not take any money before the contract has been completed and he's finished completion of the restaurant to the house. But he would then get a higher percentage of the sale of the house on completion. So it's to Fabian's benefit that he would actually get the benefit of a higher percentage sale depending on how much the house is sold for than he would do if he just gets paid for the work done. So he's taken the risk of getting a higher amount. And Big House Limited, the advantage to them is that they don't have to outlay any money for the work being carried out at this time. So again, Big House Limited also has an advantage of doing it this way as well. So Fabian carries out the work and he's gutted out the whole restaurant and he's moved everything out. But then he becomes ill and he is unable to complete the work. So the question really is, what happens now? Does Big House Limited have to pay Fabian any money? What are your thoughts on this? Does Big House Limited have to pay Fabian any money?
No.
Why?
Because he didn't complete the...
Yes, so there are various ways to discharge performance, discharge the contract. One of the way is performance. And we can see that in Cutter versus Powell, where a shipmate was on a ship and he had negotiated higher wages at the end when he had finished the trip. But unfortunately in 1795 he died 2 days before he was due to complete the whole journey of all the work that he had done. And his wife put in a claim saying that he only died 2 days before. However, the judge held that in this case no compensation could be given to the wife, even though he's done all the days throughout in the voyage and 2 days he missed. He wasn't entitled to any she wasn't entitled to any compensation because it was supposed to be complete performance. So because it wasn't complete performance and he hasn't carried out, and because he negotiated a higher price in terms of that, getting his wages at the end, because he would have benefited from that, then they weren't able to claim compensation for all the work he had carried out. So we can see in a similar way that Fabian hasn't really carried out all the work for the restaurant because he negotiated a higher price, and yet in the same instance the higher price was not paid and completed because he hadn't finished the work. Likewise, we can see that in Argos Limited versus Renaissance and Sons, a builder had negotiated a deal removing the risk on completion, and he himself as well didn't actually complete. And because he didn't complete, even though he had finished the majority of the work, he couldn't get any compensation. So we can see in both these cases performance hasn't been complete when they had negotiated performance as a condition to the contract. Another way you can discharge a contract is by partial performance. Fabian could argue that he has partially completed the contract, but partial performance doesn't really exist for the person bringing the claim. The partial performance really resides with the person or the innocent party. So if the innocent party agrees to partial performance, then Fabian will be entitled to some money. So Big House, would they be likely to give him partial performance? No. Why? Because basically he hasn't completed the work. And not only hasn't he completed the work, now there's loads of rats in the building and everything else, and there's an infestation which has created this infestation in the neighbourhood, which they will have to clear up. So it's created a load of mess, hasn't been completed, and then they'll only have to get other builders to carry on the work that he should have done. So it's not to Big House Limited his advantage to actually give him partial performance, even though that option is available, but only for the innocent party being Big House Limited, if they wanted to give partial performance. Another way, there are two other ways that you can discharge a contract. One is by frustration. Frustration is by illness or death, if someone can't carry out a contract. But even that Fabian became ill, he's still not going to get any money anyway, under frustration, because he still hasn't completed the contract. And then the only other way you can discharge a contract is by breach of condition. If you breach a contract, then you can cancel the contract and even sue for damages. But in this case, a condition has been breached. What is the condition that's been breached? What's the condition that's been breached? Well, the condition that's been breached is that Fabian hasn't completed the work. The condition to him being paid was that he would transform the restaurant into a 3-bedroom house, and he hasn't done that. So we can see that he hasn't completed it. So when you look at a performance, he hasn't completed performance. Partial for performance he has done, but it's not really in Big House's interest to complete partial performance. There is a breach of condition. So again, that's in the interests of Big House Limited. They can cancel the contract without paying him. And in addition to that, not only can they not pay him, if they wanted to, they could try and get the work done and sue him for the difference in terms of any additional monies that they would have been charged. Okay? And then the final thing would be frustration, illness. But even due to illness or death, he still wouldn't get any compensation for the work done, because he had negotiated a higher price, as seen in Cutter versus Powell, 1795. Okay, so again, we can see that the defendant had no option but to take performance given in the case of Sumpert versus Hedges, 1898. A builder could not claim for work completed because he abandoned work before the buildings had been contracted for, even though it had been fairly near completion. Thus, Big House Limited is not really choosing to accept Fabian's performance with regards to partial performance, because they've still got all that work to carry out, and they still need someone to go in to the building and clear it out. So to conclude, Fabian will not be able to recover any monies for his endeavours. However, because he did assume the risk, and because he took that risk on board, he's not due any monies. Fabian will not be able to rely on the doctrine of partial performance, as Big House Limited had no real option but to accept the work done, receiving a problem rather than a benefit. Okay? So that's on the question of Fabian and Big House Limited. Now, what about, does anyone have any questions on that, in terms of answering the question? Yes, no? Yes? Okay, so the second part of the question was, how should the monies be distributed? So, Lauren is the legal executive. The banks have now gone to the courts and have opted for a winding up option of Big House Limited because they can't pay their debts. The banks are owed £250,000 by Big House Limited. And Big House Limited, their only assets is the house. So the only asset is the house, and that's valued, or the restaurant, which is valued at £200,000. So if it goes into liquidation, then the question is, how are these monies going to be distributed? There is a bank charge on Big House Limited of £200,000, but the banks owed £250,000. So how is this money going to be distributed? So if there's only £200,000 in the business, which is the money in the restaurant, who gets the first set of monies? The liquidator. And how much is the liquidator owed? 10,000. Good. So we know that Lauren is the liquidator and her costs are £10,000. So 10,000 from 200,000 is how much? No, 10,000 from 200,000 is how much? 190. So £190,000 is left. And where does that money go to? Or who does it go to next? No. So that money goes to the bank, because the bank has a charge on the restaurant of £200,000. So how much do they get?
190.
They get £190,000. So they don't even get the 200,000. So in total, they are owed £60,000. So when you're answering this question, you need to explain the case scenario of the bank being owed £250,000 to Big House Limited, and Big House Limited restaurant is only valued at £200,000. You have to explain that the liquidator's costs are £10,000. Okay, and then once you take away the liquidator's costs, what is left is £190,000, which goes to the bank. And then there's no other money left, so no one gets anything else. But if there were more money available, then it would be distributed in the following sequence. It would first go to the liquidator, fees and expenses, and then secured creditors with a fixed charge, and then followed by preferential creditors, followed by secured creditors with a floating charge, then followed by unsecured creditors, followed by connected unsecured creditors, and then finally at the bottom of the list, shareholders. So as well as explaining all the monies and the Big House and the bank and who it goes to, you must also explain each one of these. Not in great detail. You must explain liquidator fees, secured creditors, preferential creditors, secured creditors with a floating charge, unsecured creditors, creditors, unsecured creditors, and shareholders. Now, where's all this information? On your online class, on a Google class, and if you click on the link onto the slides of P5 and P6, you will see this link which explains all of these sections. Now obviously you must make sure that you reference correctly, and you must make sure that you explain each one of these in about 3 or 4 lines. Are there any questions on these 2 answers? No? Okay, thank you.